This this is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews inside the commercial, packaging, wide format, and in-plant communities.
Hi, welcome to the Impressions Xchange podcast. I'm Mark Michelson, editor-in-chief of Print and Impressions magazine. And today it's my pleasure to have Adriane Harrison, who's the Vice President of Human Relations at Printing Industries of America. Welcome, Adriane.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Very good, thank you. So, what I'd like to talk about in this podcast is obviously with the COVID-19 situation that's going on, a lot of printing company owners and even employees, there's so many questions about how do you react when these things happen. So what we'd like to look into today is what happens if one of your employees tests positive, a family member, things like that, things that impact the workplace, because these questions are coming up obviously on a continual basis. And as a printing company owner, or an HR department, a lot of times you may not totally understand how you should respond to this. So let's just start out with a first basic question. If you're a printing company, can you require people to actually wear a mask at work?
Yeah, actually you can. There are a couple of little carve-out exceptions to that. For instance, if somebody has an ADA qualifying medical condition and wearing a mask would not work for them, then those people could be carved out. But as a general matter, yeah, you can ask your workforce to wear masks or require them to wear masks. The catch there is that if you are requiring them to wear masks, you need to provide it. Otherwise, it needs to be a voluntary thing. So if you are requiring it, you must provide that PPE. These would need to be disposable masks or masks that in some way could be sanitized if there was reuse involved. But I believe that production on paper masks has increased significantly in the last several weeks, and so it is possible, I don't know, that masks may soon be available to the workforce, and if so, you could require it. Otherwise, you can ask people to wear them voluntarily, and if that's the case, they can make them at home and take them home and wash them and wear them again, and that would not fall on the responsibility of the company to replace. But if you're going to require it, you have to provide it.
So really, you would only expect an employee to wear a mask for one shift. I mean, you would not expect them to save that mask with it, without it being cleaned in some manner to
right.
bring it to work the next day.
Yeah, I'm guessing that if a company were to require it, it would need to be a disposable paper mask they wear one shift at a time, and then they're disposed of in a trash can that would be lined and have a lid on it, or at least as people walk out, dump their masks in a trash can, and then immediately close that up and, take it out to the dumpster, that sort of thing. If people are doing it as a voluntary basis, if you make an announcement, you are free to wear a mask here at work at any time, then absolutely they can bring a mask from home. That can be a cloth mask that the person is in charge of cleaning themselves, right? It doesn't have to be a disposable mask if they're taking it home and it's their own thing. I would say this, there are some positions within a facility where people may have to shout out to another person to get their attention. If that is the case, then a mask that can be pulled down so somebody could shout would be important. There are just different aspects of it. I think most people probably could get away in a printing facility with wearing a mask because if they did need to shout out something to someone else, they could pull it down and holler out to another person. But yeah, as a general matter, it has been approved through the EEOC, the CDC. All those places have made recommendations about mask wearing and allowed it to happen.
Okay, so masks is one form of protection. How can an employer just minimize employees' exposure in general beyond that?
Well, so this is an interesting question, and I have it about immediately what can we do, and also I already have people reaching out to me about in the long term what can we do to minimize exposure. So I will save the discussion about the long term for another visit, but for right now, of course, what is important is distancing. And at a printing facility, most people who are working are 6 to 10 feet apart anyway. There aren't very many people who are lined up side by side doing things in a facility. If they are, we need to see what we can do about moving them apart or um, reducing numbers so that it's like every other person at a station, that sort of thing. That's one thing. So distancing in on the production floor. Then if you have a common area, distancing in the common area is really important. So you could consider just closing off the seated table area of a break room, or create a rule that depending on the size of the tables, only one person could sit at a table, or if it's a long table, maybe one person at each end. And you could demarcate that with tape, like somebody could sit here, somebody could sit there, and the tape would already be pre-measured as knowing that it's appropriate distance apart. You could do things on restroom doors with, if they're just push open, they're not locking doors, might want to have some sort of occupied sign that could be flipped so that nobody comes in or something like that. Another thing many people are doing is they're spacing their shifts apart. So if you have shifts that, you have your arriving shift coming in before your departing shift has finished up, what you may want to do is create a situation where either you time the shifts differently, so now they're staggered, so there's about a 15-minute gap between the shifts, and that way one group of people will be gone and out of the building before the next group of people arrives. That 15 minutes might also give time for sanitizing. If you have a couple people designated to sanitize areas between shifts, that would be a helpful technique or a helpful strategy. And then also, if you cannot stagger the timing of your shifts, then maybe require people to stay in their cars until there is an all clear given, and then have them come in. So, instead of a 15-minute gap, it's 2 or 3 minutes, but get everybody out of the building in an orderly fashion, get everybody in the building in an orderly fashion, keeping distancing requirements, and then minimizing their ability to pass by each other. Sanitizing is a really important strategy as well, and what you may consider is having sanitizing products at each workstation, so that between shifts, as an outgoing shift is leaving, they can clean their work area with wearing gloves and using products that are designated for that work area, so that they're the only people touching them. So there's a sanitizing guide on both the PIA COVID-19 HR page, as well as the NAPCO COVID-19 channel HR section. So we have sanitizing information that can be found there. Gary Jones has developed a good sanitizing guide, an excellent sanitizing guide, as well as the CDC has some suggestions about sanitization as well.
What should an employer do if one of their workers does test positive for COVID-19?
So this is kind of complicated because it's happening more frequently. I'm getting this question more frequently. As the virus spreads, people are bound to get it, and our employees are either possibly going to get it themselves or think they have it. So when you have that, if you have an employee that has the symptoms, make sure they get tested if at all possible. I think tests are more available now, although in certain areas they may be scarce. They get a test and they're confirmed positive, obviously they stay home, and the emergency paid sick leave will kick in for that, so that the employers can run that time, which should be carefully tracked, on the emergency paid sick leave, and then they can get tax credits for that sick leave that they're paying to the COVID-19 positive employee. So that's one thing. The second thing is all the information about their illness must be kept confidential. And so it has to be in a HIPAA protected section of the employee file or separate folder. So that's another thing. The third thing is to know is that if their sick leave extends beyond the 80 hours, then they would follow the regular FMLA protocol. So you would probably want to start the FMLA clock at the first day out. And if they end up not needing to be out longer than 2 weeks, no problem. But if they do, you've got it already in place and clocking. So they fall under regular FMLA. The other FMLA, the expansion, applies only to childcare related to COVID-19 issues. So now you've taken care of that employee directly and you're following their condition and of course providing any kind of support that's necessary. Now you want to sanitize the facility. So there are companies that will sanitize the facility professionally. Possibly you have your own crew that can do it. Make a decision which you want to choose, but sanitize the facility with special emphasis on common areas and places where the sick employee was working, their particular work area. So that's really important. The next thing is, and that should happen very quickly, is to give notice to the workers without revealing the identity of the person who has been tested positive. And that's a fairly controversial thing. People want to know, wait, should we even tell the rest of the employees whether there's somebody who's tested positive? We don't want to violate any kind of privacy laws. Their identity will probably be able to be figured out, et cetera, et cetera. My answer to that is people are going to figure it out anyway. So don't reveal their identity. Don't give any kind of characteristics, but you could send a letter out to, or an email, whatever your mode of communication is, to your employees and say, one of your colleagues has been tested positive for COVID-19. Here are the things that we're doing to protect you, and list out the sanitizing protocol that's been put in place, that the employees will, you're wishing them the very best of health, and that this person would not be allowed to return to work until after they have been cleared for return to duty. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Because here's the thing, people are going to gossip and people are going to panic if they don't know. You have to control the messaging, and the messaging is you're doing the best you can to keep everyone safe. And so do those things. Do the best things that you can to keep everyone safe, and then let them know that you're doing it. As far as that employee themselves, they can't return to work until they have 72 hours without a fever and 2 negative tests. So this assumes that we can get them 2 negative tests, but I believe that is now possible, particularly if you've been diagnosed. So then sending the positive tests and fever-free information in a fit-for-duty letter from the doctor or whoever the treating physician is. It could be a form letter even, but as long as it comes from a treating physician or their office, then that would be acceptable to allow that person back to work.
What would you do as an employer in this situation where one of your workers has someone in their household that tests positive, maybe not the employee themselves?
Yeah, so this is going to happen and has happened in printing facilities. And it's a little bit tricky because the person themselves have not been tested positive, and so that's important. So you are allowed, once they make you aware that someone in their household has tested positive and that they have a known exposure to the virus, you are allowed to ask them, well, what steps have you taken to limit your exposure? And at that point, if somebody in the house is tested positive and they're still moving freely about the house, then the employee should not be allowed to come to work. However, if the person who is tested positive is fully isolated within the house and not around your employee, then my recommendation, and this follows the CDC recommendations, is you need 72 hours. You need at least 3 days to have that person stay home, under quarantine and monitor their health. If they have any symptoms, of course, they would not return to work. If they don't have any symptoms, after 72 hours, they could come back to work. So here's what I would do if that is the case. I would absolutely take their temperature every day before their shift. And any fever means that they go home. Similarly, if they have any other symptoms, if they start to develop a cough, body aches, that sort of thing, go home. COVID-19 doesn't always present with fever. And so you have to be aware that there are other symptoms that may spring up. And if so, then that employee goes back home. I would ask that employee to wear masks or provide a mask for them, which they wear from vehicle all the way into the building, all through their shift, and don't take off till they get back in their vehicle. And I would limit their contact with common areas. I would say at least for 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, ask them not to eat lunch in the break room. Ask them to bring their lunch and eat lunch somewhere kind of by themselves. If you have the ability to isolate a bathroom, if there's like a separate bathroom somewhere else in the building, ask them to use the separate bathroom. If that's not possible, you could designate a stall or a urinal sink that would be designated just for, this employee for a period of time. Now, there's a question, does that interfere? Is that an EEOC problem? Are we singling them out for special treatment? And we really have a little bit of a gray area here. OSHA requires, the general duty clause in OSHA requires us to keep the workplace safe from known hazards. And someone who has been known to be exposed to the COVID-19 virus, even if they're not sick, could fall in the known hazard. That's a potential hazard. It's definitely a hazard, of course, if they were to test positive. But short of that, I think that an abundance of caution would require maybe isolating them to whatever degree possible for a period of time. 2 weeks is not really necessary. Symptoms usually come anywhere from 24 hours to 5 days after exposure, but CDC says really 72 hours, we should know if somebody is going to have symptoms and be positive. In addition, there should be careful disinfection of their workstations and sanitization of workstations where these employees who have had known exposure are. And then, again, consider the shift change strategies I spoke about. We all hear these stories about people like, most recently, I just read yesterday, George Stephanopoulos, who has COVID-19 positive, and I think there are other people that are in the news, and no symptoms, really, no symptoms at all. So here's somebody who has known exposure because his wife was sick and he's tested positive, but, he's got no symptoms, so he's a carrier, and he would be considered a threat in the workforce if he were to go into a printing facility being COVID positive, right? So even though it's been 72 hours, I think there's a period of time where you want to ask people to separate themselves if they have had known exposure.
I guess it's just a closing question because, you talk about carriers with no symptoms. That's got everybody on edge, both in our daily lives, in the workplace.
Absolutely.
What kind of strategies would you advise an employer to institute to kind of keep morale up, because people are so stressed out in the current environment?
Yeah, it really, really, really is hard. One of the things is if you have an EAP with your health plan, absolutely make sure people know about it, because anxiety and depression and fear are rampant, and it's, it's justified. It's a scary thing to have to deal with, and much of the world has changed. And that's just talking about the virus. There's all sorts of financial instability that comes with it as well.
Exactly.
So people are really scared. So an EAP is really important. I think that if your facility is still running and you have enough money to do some nice gestures for your employees, think about doing things like buying products for them that they could use during this time period. So suggestions would be hand sanitizer, toilet paper, pasta and dry food items, food kits that they can take home and add water and it's a meal, things like that. That's a really good gesture. Or they're still coming to work and they're buying gasoline, buy gift cards for the gas station, things like that. Small gestures to show that you're thinking of them and that you appreciate what they're doing. You're not going to incur a lot of cost by buying somebody a bottle of hand sanitizer or a $10 gift card or a $20 gift card. It's not going to cost the employer all that much, and it's really going to go far to showing your employees how much you care about them. The other thing that goes really far is really being careful about these safety procedures. People get anxious if they see people close by them. So, enforcing distancing, put marks on the floor to show people how to stay apart, and demonstrate to them that safety is really important to you. And even though you're still at work and doing your thing, we can do our very best to try and minimize your risk. That sort of thing helps with morale. There isn't a whole lot you can do. You can't reassure them that they're not going to get sick because you can't make that promise. You can't reassure them honestly about the status of business because nobody really knows. Is business going to, crash? Is it going to explode like a rocket? Is it, nobody knows. But what you can say is, in this moment right now, I'm going to do something nice for you to show you that I care, and that it's really important to me that you know that we appreciate you coming to work during this very stressful time.
Right. And, I should point out that you mentioned the COVID-19 resource channel, which can be accessed through the Printing Impressions website, which is piworld.com. And you're providing almost daily updates, as well as other people from PIA and SGIA, in terms of changes that are occurring, because this is all really very fluid. A lot of these HR things are changing quite rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, since the channel launched, I update my information at least once a day, sometimes more frequently than that. We didn't update over the weekend, but there'll be more updates coming this week. There's more legislation that may come down that could affect HR issues. We just don't know yet. So we're definitely trying to keep everybody very, very aware of the status of HR and strategies on moving forward. And, we'll be producing really helpful material pretty much constantly through this entire crisis about how to manage the COVID-19 situation.
Great. Thank you so much for your insight today, Adriane.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mark. I really, really appreciate the opportunity, and certainly I encourage people to reach out if they need help.
Great. Thank you. And thank you so much to our listeners for listening to this Impressions Exchange podcast.